Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Wing. Today I will be sharing with you the transitions of my life ever since I moved to Canada at the age of 12 in 1988. I was born on a farm outside of Guangzhou in China. Life was very simple and basic back in the 1980s living in China. It's very opposite to the city. As a child, I've always wondered what it's like if I was able to move to Canada to live with my uncles, aunts, and grandparents who have been living in Canada since the 1970s. And in 1988, my family and I were able to move to Canada to start a new life. Little did I know that life would change so drastically for me, and I was not prepared for this life in Canada. In the beginning, being 12 years old and a new immigrant in Vancouver, Canada, life was just so shockingly different than what I used to know from China living on a farm. Being in a Canadian city, a multiculturalized country, I was experiencing all kinds of cultural shock. At first, I didn't even know how to speak any English. It was like I had to start taking ESL classes, and I always compared myself to all the Canadian-born Chinese kids who had it so easy. They didn't need to go to ESL class. They spoke English like the white kids, and I didn't speak any English. I was like a black sheep in school. Even though being in Vancouver, the Asian community was very big. The population of Asian immigrants in Vancouver was a lot more than any other city in Canada at the time. I was just trying to fit in. I didn't know how to live this new life, and all the new foods and new cultures and the new language, I was having a hard time adapting. During my early teenage years, I really did not like living in Canada. I was quite unhappy that there's so many changes that I had to go through. And also, it was a more complicated life than being in a farm, being in a country boy, and just having a very simple life on the farm. I really miss being on the farm, raising the cattle, going fishing in the river, swimming in the pond, playing with the ducks and chickens and the pigs. I mean, that life was so different than what it was in Vancouver. It was a drastic change that I was not really ready or gotten used to, even after 3 years. I just didn't want to be in Canada at the time anymore. At the age of 14, when I was in grade 9 in high school, I was inspired to learn fashion. And I think that was the beginning of another drastic life change that I was never prepared for. I never thought that I would be interested in art and fashion. And then I started taking sewing classes in grade 9 and art classes. I actually dropped out of auto mechanic class. And when my mom found out that I dropped out of auto mechanic class to take sewing class, she freaked out at me and she screamed and yelled at me, and it was like, she thought I was making a really bad decision not to learn auto mechanic and chose to learn fashion, to learn how to sew. I was very insistent that that was a dream that I was going to pursue, was to learn fashion and eventually want to become a fashion designer. Throughout high school, I took all the sewing classes I could get my hands on. And I was determined that after high school, I would go to New York to study fashion design and become a fashion designer. That was my dream when I was a teenager. I had no idea that that dream was very unattainable. I have very fond memories of the mid-1990s to the late 1990s living in Vancouver. Because while that time was a very hard time in my life, there was a lot of fun and exciting moments in that period. See, I was outed by my family and relatives when I was only 17 years old, and things got really bad and out of hand that I pretty much had to run away from home when I was 17, and I kind of lived on my own and struggled on my own for about 2 years. That was also the time when I learned to become a gay man, learned to become a young gay man living in Vancouver and meeting people in the gay community, going out clubbing. It was a period of wild and fun times, and then it was also the time when I became Jessica. You see, how did I become Jessica? The year was 1995 when I was actively getting more involved in the gay community and doing volunteer work at the center, which is a gay community center in the west end of Vancouver. And I came across meeting some drag queens going out clubbing, and I was always curious about trying to do drag. So in the parade of 1995 in Vancouver, I decided to try doing drag for the first time. And my first time doing drag, my makeup was so bad, it was so ugly, I didn't look good at all. But it was fun, and I think I got really hooked on doing drag ever since the parade in Vancouver in 1995. And because I'm good at making clothes, making my own clothes, and suddenly I got to make clothes for Jessica. And that was really fun. And also living in West End Vancouver, it was so easy for me to go out to the gay bars with some gay friends or a few drag friends. And then within 6 months, I became really good at it. I became really good at doing my makeup and the wigs and making, beautiful dresses. Sometimes they're very sexy, sultry, and I even try to get on stage and perform as a drag queen. I mean, for me, doing drag was all about the glamour. There was nothing sexual about drag for me. It was like, I just wanted to look fabulous and beautiful and gorgeous. And a lot of times, I looked so real because my makeup was so good. I've gone from not knowing how to do makeup to being able to do makeup so flawlessly, putting on false lashes and contouring my face and all of that. And boy, those 6-inch platform heels, it was just so painful, and it's to wear after 6 hours, but I sure look fabulous. My legs were so beautiful. I mean, I was so slim back then. I think when I was like 19 and 20, in the early days of me doing drag, I probably had a 29 or 30-inch waist, which was shockingly tiny. I was so slim, I probably weighed about 130 pounds back then. Now I weigh about 175, but I'm all built and muscular right now. So my body has changed so drastically compared to 25 years ago when I was in my early 20s. And I really had a lot of fun doing drag. I went out, party 2 or 3 times a week, clubbing, dancing in drag, sometimes performing in drag. It was just so fun. And there's something about having a full transformation, becoming this goddess and diva for the night. It was like some sort of adrenaline, and people giving you all this attention whether you're walking on the street to the nightclub, to the gay bar, and whether there's straight people or gay people looking at you, the attention just was, it was so gratifying somehow. And sometimes I even got hit on by straight guys or bi guys, but for me, like I said, drag was never a sexual thing. But you know what? One time I did something that I was very desperate, because during that time I was also a struggling artist. I was poor, and I didn't have very much money because I was self-supported and working my day job as a waiter and trying to save up money, trying to pay my own rent, and also have a very expensive hobby of doing drag. Drag is a very expensive hobby. And one time I was really tight on money, and when I went clubbing, this middle-aged man approached me and asked me for sexual favor if I do him a sexual favor for $200. I mean, it was just like for me to get him off. It wasn't anything. There was no hardcore sex whatsoever. It was a very mild sexual encounter that we had. And it was so weird that I was in drag and to help him get off. And it only was 15 minutes in my apartment, and it was like $200. I cannot believe that I did that to this day, that I was so desperate that I prostituted myself for $200 back in 1996, I believe that was. But I needed that $200. I was really short on money. And I used Jessica to make that $200. Jessica would appear in 5 parades consecutive years until year 2000. Every time she goes on a parade, it's like she was all decked out. I created this beautiful, big fancy dresses and costume for her to wear in the parade. And it was a lot of work, a lot of money for fabrics and a lot of time to make the costume or the dress. But it was all very fulfilling, very satisfying, just for that one day in the parade, in the summertime. I had a lot of fun, I really did. And eventually, I just kind of got tired of drag somehow. By year 2002, and it was also like the very last time I did drag was when I dressed up when I impersonated as Frida Kahlo to see the movie Frida. And ever since 2002, I have completely stopped doing drag. Believe me, it's been 22 years almost since I put on makeup, wore the stiletto heels, wigs, all of that. stay in the past in 2002. Isn't it strange how Jessica came and go just like that? She was in my life for about five years. She had the most glamorous and fabulous time of my life, so to speak. And sometimes I do miss that, and I really miss her. I mean, I look at pictures now, it's like, how have I gone from embracing the glamorous and the very feminine side of me, the Jessica, to becoming, the gym going, sort of muscle daddy and training kind of the new me in the middle-aged man. So it was never something that I could foresee that I would become like this, or that even back in the 90s that Jessica would completely be pushed back into the closet for good. I mean, I don't know if I will ever bring her back out again, but it's been 22 years, so it's hard to say. Sometimes I do miss her. When I see people do drag, I start to wonder, what if I do drag again one day? I mean, maybe it wouldn't work because my body and my shape is so different than when I was 20-something. Anyways, it was a very fun experience. It was a fabulous time of my life going clubbing, and it was very memorable. I really enjoyed it. The late 1990s was a period when I was, I guess I can say, promiscuous or even slutty when I was single. I mean, I have had relationships, and when I'm in a relationship, it's always monogamous. And when I'm single, I feel like I'm on a binge of lots of sexual encounters. And this was happening quite a bit back in the late 90s when I was between 22 to 26 years old. And yeah, I actually enjoyed it. I don't have any regret that I was very sexually active, that I went to the bathhouse many times. After going out clubbing, I would just go to the bathhouse and have fun. And ultimately, I was always practicing safe sex, and nothing bad happened to me. I mean, maybe if I was not practicing safe sex, probably I would have caught STDs, and it was dangerous because back then there's no such thing as PrEP, so you cannot prevent. There's no drug to prevent HIV, so you had to practice safe sex. In 1997, I was so desperate that I ended up having to move back to my parents' house. And it was also to give myself an opportunity to save money so I could go back to college to study fashion design. Because after high school, I put that dream on hold for 2 years. And I finally went back to school part-time at the college, studied fashion design for 2 years, from 1997 to 1998. And I was also still working at the restaurant, waiting table part-time to make money. My training at the college was primarily focus on fashion illustration, pattern drafting, history of fashion, and collection design. I think I exempted the sewing classes completely because I've been taking sewing classes ever since I was 13 years old, all throughout high school. So my sewing skills was already very good and wasn't required to go through any of the training in the college. I mean, I think now I think it's like having gone to the Vancouver Community College Fashion Design, it was a bit of a compromise for me. Like when I was a teenager, I dreamed about going to New York to study at FIT or Parsons, and that dream never came true. I ended up having to study fashion design at the community college, part-time, 3 nights a week, for 2 years. And it was my only option. I couldn't afford anything else. Anyways, I have to do what I had to do, and sometimes if you can't get the best, then you just get whatever. I graduated from the Vancouver Community College in 1998 with a collection of 9 beautiful evening gowns that I designed and made. And guess what? Jessica was in the fashion show. Yes. Out of the 9 pieces, 7 models were my dresses, and 2 of them was worn by Jessica. So it was quite a shocker that to a lot of people who attended the graduation fashion show, that to see a graduate student to be in full drag modeling the collection piece, and that was quite an experience. I think it was the talk of the town for a day there. Anyways, I had fun. I did my one-way thing. It was fabulous. It was a fabulous and memorable graduation fashion show. After I finished the fashion design program at the VCC, I didn't realize that it was going to be really hard for me to find work in the fashion industry. Even my instructor back then, she told me, Wing, just to let you know, it's like the industry in Canada is so hard. Just be prepared that it's not going to be easy for you to find work in the fashion industry, even after you have graduated. I think at the time I didn't really want to believe her, but now that I think about it, she was right. It is really hard to find work in the fashion industry in Canada, or in Vancouver back then anyways. I sent my resumes to other designers to see if they need assistant designers, and I went everywhere in Vancouver after I graduated. I did not get a single job. And so what did I end up doing was I saved up some money for a couple years for my waiter job, and at the time I was living with my ex, whom I was with for 3 years, and I was planning to save up some money so I could lease a place, and in Yaletown I leased a studio so I could do custom evening wear dressmaking, and I had that for the year 2000 to 2001 for just 1 year. That was a very bad decision on my end, because I basically invested a lot of money, like not huge amount of money, but to me back then, working as a waiter, basically I put in all my savings, and also renting that place. I can't remember exactly how much the rent was, but it was costing me a lot of money, and for overhead and starting up and the rent and this and that, and I was getting some business, some clients that wanted to come and get dresses made, prom dresses for their daughter, and then there's some people that wanted me to do custom corsets, because that was kind of a niche, and I did some corset making as well. So, but it wasn't enough to get by. It wasn't enough revenue to make it worthwhile. So I was only able to do that for 1 year until I just ran out of money. I couldn't do it anymore, and I basically failed. My my dream for fashion was being shattered. I was really disappointed that there was no fashion work, and also my own custom dressmaking business was failing, and credit card maxed out, and I had to close the place, and just nothing else to do but just keep on working as the waiter, my day job. And I really didn't know what to do anymore at the time. It's like, maybe my mom was right. I made a wrong decision about my career choice. Maybe I should have become a mechanic, auto mechanic, or something else normal. And here I am. It was like 2002. I felt so lost professionally, financially. I didn't know what's next for me. And then I just decided to leave Vancouver completely. So I packed everything and I drove myself across Canada in November of 2002. I still remember to this day that when I drove all the way across Canada, all the way to Northern Ontario, that I saw all these frozen lakes. It was just surreal. And it was also so dangerous for me that I was driving across Canada into the frozen winter of Ontario without snow tires. It was, now that I think about it, I didn't even die from driving in that kind of winter condition. It was a miracle. Just when I thought my life was going to get better and easier when I moved to Toronto, I was wrong. 2003 to 2006, I was more lost. I was more failed in life in many ways than I could imagine before leaving Vancouver. I guess starting a new life in a new city with very little money and no job prospects, and you don't know anybody, it's it's bound to be difficult. And that's what it was. I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't know anybody. I had $5,000, and that was my new life in Toronto. And I still had to wait tables as my day job to make money to survive. And at that point, I was just like, I was so sick and tired of working at the restaurant. I was so sick and tired of serving people food and having to pretend to be smiling at grumpy and difficult customers. And I just wish there was a miracle for me in terms of work, in terms of having career. And I guess miracles do come to you when you least expect it. So in 2005, I met my mentor in the film industry. She was also from Vancouver, and she was actually my customer at the restaurant. And when I realized that she was a costume designer for the film industry, I basically pestered her and asked her to give me some direction or help me get into the film industry. So she was my first contact in the film industry, and she really connected me to another costume designer that assisted her. And in 2006, I found myself working full-time in the film industry, and doing non-union shows, because I wasn't unionized yet at the time. I had to go from doing non-union shows and work my way up to becoming a union member. And it was the first year working in film. Even though I was doing low budget movies, it was such an eye-opening experience for me that I learned how to work on set, dress the actors, and do all of those things that I never thought that I would get to do. And sometimes I worked on some of those movies. Even in the first year, they had some well-known actors and former A-list movie stars in it. It was such an amazing experience to be part of those sets. And I was a complete newbie, but I was having the time of my life. I thought that was really somehow the career transition that I was making, that I never planned to do. And the money wasn't very good in the beginning because it was non-union show. So I had to, it wasn't as good, and I just had to keep going at it, and hopefully that I would get into union. And it took me about 4 or 5 years before I was able to finally get into IATSE, the big film union. And before that, I was able to get into the smaller union, NABED, for 1 year. And shortly after that, I transitioned to IATSE instead. And my career was starting to be on the right track, I guess. I basically, when I got into IATSE, I had no idea that they had such big budget movies and TV shows, unlike NABED or those non-union shows I've done, that they actually had workrooms or sewing rooms that had 2 or 3 cutters and 4 or 5 sewers. And I was placed in one of the big sci-fi futuristic movie as a sewer, and I just thought, oh my god, I cannot believe that I'm making this kind of money. It was like, it was, I could, in 2 days, I could make more than what I make in 1 week working as a waiter. And it was amazing. And I got to work on costumes, even though it's not fashion, but I guess all my fashion training had a purpose. It became part of it transcended into a costume career, so to speak, that I never planned to do so. So I spent 3 years sewing for other cutters in ISC, and then when I was mentally ready, I finally started to take the jobs as a cutter and fitter. And I guess now it's been a good 10 years that I've been working full-time as a cutter and fitter. I've stopped working as a set supervisor or a set costumer since 2007, since my second year working in film. I don't really have the mentality to work on set. It's just like the hours is so brutal. It's like you're working 15 hours on set, and then you have to go home, and then you sleep for 5 hours, and you have to go back to set. That was not the life that I wanted to continue on. At least working as a costume cutter and fitter, it's more glamorous for me because it's more creatively satisfying for me, because I get to create the costume, draft the pattern, cut the costume, have my sewers make the costume, and I fit the actors and make them to become the characters that they are on film and or television. And sometimes I get to meet some really big movie stars or even Oscar-winning actors and actresses. And sometimes they're just wonderful and lovely people in person that you don't expect that they would be so easygoing and so friendly, So by the time I was in my 40s, early 40s, I think my career was quite stable in the film industry already. And I have to say that having had failed relationships, romantic relationships, and then I put a lot of focus in my career in my 40s. It gave me a lot of satisfaction. Like, sometimes once you have had so much sexual encounters and dating experiences and relationship experiences, once you had so much of that, and then you realize that they were not making you happy or fulfill you anymore, then somehow you have to figure out, is it your career? Is it your work that is going to give you that satisfaction? I think it was. And I've been able to work on many interesting projects, some high-profile TV shows and movies. And in 2019, I was over the moon when I got called by a supervisor that I have worked with to go and work on a big budget period fantasy TV series in Prague. I was like, I drop everything, I just go. They asked me, can you fly out next week? I said, I'll fly out tomorrow if you want me to. I feel like it was just so surreal that I was in Prague working on that show, and it was so foreign because a lot of people did not speak English, and I had to use the Google Translator, but they were so nice to me and so welcoming. And the city, because I've never been to Europe, the city is it's so rich in historical vibes and architectural. I feel like it looked exactly like those historical vampire period films or something. I really love working in Europe, and I was able to work in Budapest also in 2022, so three years after that. And for me, it's like if I get to go to Europe again to work for the third time or even fourth time in the future, that would be an added bonus. I would be so happy if I get that. But I have no expectation. I'm happy working on interesting projects in Toronto as well. And like now that I'm 48, I'm pretty happy being a single man, single cat dad. I have a fulfilling life. Like I make enough money to afford vacations. I get to go to New York once or twice a year. I love New York so much. I guess it's because I never got to go to New York to study fashion design, that now that I've been living in Toronto for the last 22 years. It's so easy to go to New York and to watch all of the exhibits and all of the Broadway shows. And I love the Caribbean. It's like working in the film industry is so stressful that being able to go to the Caribbean for vacation once a year or even twice a year is just so therapeutic. Because I love being on the beach in my Speedo. It's like, whether I go by myself or not, like, it's been a long time since I've gone on vacations with anybody. I used to go to the Caribbean vacations with my ex when I was with him for 5 years. But the last 12 years, it's like, I go by myself, it's fine. It's all good. I mean, I will try to stay at the nicest 5-star resort because I want to be able to give myself the best life if I can. I work very hard for that. So, thinking back, now that I've lived in Canada for 36 years, and I've only gone back to China once. That was 1996, when I was, I believe, 20 years old. I went back with my parents, and there was already a lot of changes. I just can't imagine now if I go back to China. I mean, I miss China still. I feel like maybe in a couple of years when I'm 50, I would like to have a grand revisit of China. Go back to the countryside, the farming village where I grew up, and visit the old places and see if people still remember me. And I also would like to go to Shanghai, Beijing, and Guilin, and all of other cities in China. But I'm very much a Canadian now. I guess culturally I'm very diversified. So I'm not really just Chinese. I'm Canadian Chinese, but I embrace so many different cultures. So for me, if I was to move back to China now, I don't think I can do it, because after 36 years, my life experience have changed me so much that I wouldn't be able to fit into living a life in China anymore. And on that note, that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions and comments, please leave it down for me. And I hope you will subscribe so that I can have more opportunity to create more videos for you. Until next time, take care.